Welcome to Venture, the world of small business and big ideas. We welcome Rick Steves to the program. A bargain hunter at heart, this eternal optimist may just be the guy to get Americans out of their comfort zones and out into the world, even in tough times.
But I'll give it a go, Danish style.
He enjoys some of the finer things life has to offer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you understand and appreciate the contrast.
This is what kind of fish?
And he's made quite a business by teaching others to do the same. If you've been to the travel section at your local bookstore anytime in the past 30 years, or if you tune into public television or radio, you probably already know this guy.
Yes.
He's travel writer Rick Steves. He's the man behind the guidebook series Europe Through the Back Door, and perhaps the best-known advice giver for globetrotters everywhere.
Show me something I don't need. That would be very nice.
Steves is also an example of a guy who has made his hobby into a career and his persona into a brand with the help of his notoriously goofy expressions.
It's all Greek to me. Sprawling metropolis on the Bosporus. All cleaned up for a Turkish experience.
It was all very mom and pop in the early days. In 1979, he opened a storefront business in his hometown of Edmonds, Washington. He taught folks how to be savvy travelers, and of course, took a few jaunts to Europe to update his books. Readership picked way up in the 80s and 90s, pushing the travel guru's business to new heights.
That's good, yeah.
Today, his company, Backdoor Productions, oversees his television series, guidebooks, and European bus tours. Steves calculates that he has spent a third of his adult life living out of a suitcase overseas in far-off lands such as Greece,
The best of the Peloponnesian Peninsula,
the Czech Republic,
We're soaking up the offbeat delights.
and Burgundy.
the quintessential French culture.
But it's not all fun in the sun for Steves. The world has changed since 9/11, and American tourists, his target audience, have built up a lot of fear about international travel. His new book, Travel as a Political Act, tries to address this very issue. Steves wants to illustrate how important it is for Americans to broaden their worldview. Plus, tourism hasn't stopped entirely. And until that day comes, you'll find Rick living the dream, traveling, eating, drinking, and seeing the sights.
Yeah.
And we all want your job, Rick Steves. I don't think one person wouldn't want that job. Thanks for joining us today.
It's nice to be here.
So glad to have you.
Looking at that clip, it looks like a nice job, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does, except you just told us you're back from a 70-day jaunt, and it's tiring.
Oh, well, when I work, it's like breathing straight oxygen. Honestly, I've worked 70 days in a row, probably 70 12-hour days in the last month and a half. I was in Croatia 2 days ago, and I just love my work because I get to go over there and be the globe-trotting guinea pig. I get to make mistakes and take careful notes. When I get ripped off, I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm gonna learn that scam, put it into my books, and come home and share it with as many Americans as I can so they can learn from my mistakes rather than their own and travel smarter.
And you've built an empire of it. So let's start. I want to start back at the beginning because you've told the story many, many times. You were 14 years old, first time you went abroad with your family. But I think what's more interesting is that your parents were actually importers of pianos.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's how you ended up going on the trip.
Yeah. I remember distinctly not wanting to go, thinking it's a stupid idea. I didn't speak the language. I haven't even seen my own country and so on. It's my summer. I want to play with my friends. And my parents made me go to Germany to go to the piano factories and then visit relatives in Norway. And, I was a 14-year-old with a bad attitude over there. And on about day 3, it occurred to me, this is not all that bad. It was different pop, different candy. I distinctly remember statuesque women with hairy armpits. It was a wonderland for this little closed-minded little American suburban kid. And a couple of years later, I was over with my parents again, visiting relatives in Norway, piano factories in Germany, and I saw other kids a couple years older than me without parents. And they had backpacks and rail passes, and Europe was their playground. And I just thought, this is a great place to go in the summer.
And you did in college, right? And you funded your trips through teaching piano.
I was a piano teacher, and it occurred to me early on, kids aren't going to practice in the summer. I'm not going to beat that one. Let's just take the summer off. I'm going to Europe. I'll see you in September. And I used to have a piano studio, and I was using my piano studio, the recital hall in my studio, for travel lectures, just for fun. I had a travel slide club and give my talks and everything.
To your student campus?
Just to anybody who wanted to come and learn about traveling. And I was, I just had this inside me desire to share my experience in travel so people could be learn from my mistakes and be inspired to go over there and enjoy maximum travel thrills for every mile, minute, and dollar. And eventually I had to make a decision. Am I going to be a piano teacher or a travel teacher? And I let my students go. I turned my recital hall into a lecture hall. And that was back in the late 70s. And really, when I think back on it, I've been doing exactly the same thing ever since. I've just got 70 great workmates now who are just as passionate as I am about this. And we've got wonderful technology where we can amplify our information beyond my wildest dreams back then. And
we're going to talk a little bit about that growth, but I just want to ask you, in 1980 you published your first guidebook, right?
That's
so
right.
where did that initiative come from, and how did that start, the actual process?
It's interesting because in the 70s I was giving all these talks, and one of my relatives said, you should write a book, and I thought, that's crazy. And then later on, most great ideas, when people tell me, I think, oh, it's crazy, but then it sits with me and I go, oh, not a bad idea. And I ended up writing my lecture. It was this 8-week course that I had about how to travel, to the book, and that became Europe Through the Back Door, my first book. And,
big book.
Well,
with Rick Steves, he wrote that book. So you're watching Venture. Stay with us. Welcome back to Venture. I'm Chris Valerio. We are joined today with Rick Steves, who invented, can I say, the travel area, the empire that you have. So you're talking a little bit about just how that first book came about. So continue telling me that.
Oh, well, in 1980, when I wrote Europe Through the Back Door, all of a sudden I had a book, and now people would take me seriously. It was sort of odd. I mean, when I had a book, whether I deserved it or not, people thought I was more of an authority, and I could capitalize on that in order to get more momentum. And really, I just wanted to amplify my teaching, and the more people I could amplify my information to, the more I measured it as success.
Okay, let's backtrack a little. How did you get that first book published? I mean, it was Avalon, was that correct?
No, it was self-published.
It was self-published.
I'm really into self-publishing.
Okay.
If you really are committed about something, you got to show the publisher you've got the initiative and the gumption to put it together yourself, because you believe in yourself before anybody else does, and publish that. And then, you know, I just was peddling it around, and eventually I realized I need a publisher, and that was great. What a
So where did you get the funds at the beginning to do that, to self-publish
piano
a book?
lessons. It doesn't. You know, all you need is a girlfriend to type it for you, and $2,000 to print up 2,000 copies, and you know, it's a little self-published book. And Europe Through the Back Door, first edition. It's come out every year since, and it's just every year. It's one of my favorite chores after 4 months of traveling to take everything I've learned and shuffle it into that book. So that's my flagship book, and it really is exciting if I look back over 30 years to see how my teaching has evolved, really. I didn't have any long-term plan. I just really don't have long-term plans. But for the first decade, I was focusing on budget skills. European travel cheap, Europe Through the Back Door, picnicking, youth hostels, bed and breakfast, you know, this kind of thing. That was the 80s. In the 90s, I realized my passion was history and art for travelers. And it was sort of sliding up, kind of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You get the bottom rung covered. Now let's think about art and culture and history and inspire people to get excited about, you know, the Habsburgs or the Renaissance or Botticelli or whatever. And in the last decade, I've slipped what I think is higher up on that pyramid of what your priorities should be when you travel, into broadening your perspective through travel. And that's sort of what I've been into lately, is that we can become more connected with the world through our travels if we choose to travel thoughtfully.
I want to touch on that, because it's the latest book, certainly interesting. But one of the questions I have is, at what point did you decide, you know, I need to expand beyond these books? At one point did you say, you know what, the business model can take a lot more?
Okay. My business model is something that I came up with accidentally. Everything needs to help everything else out. Nothing is viable on its own. Everything gets more input and more investment than it deserves, because everything is multitasking. So my guidebooks get more investment in them because we have a tour program. So I learn how to do the information from the guidebooks, which is very expensive to research, by making money taking groups around. And then I've got a tour. From that tour comes a well-researched guidebook. From the guidebook sales, more people take the tour, and then I can make a TV show from what I learned from being a tour guide and understanding what turns people on and what doesn't, what's their attention span, and so on. Suddenly I've got a guidebook, a tour program, and a TV show all talking about Ireland, and that's thriving. Where the TV show would not be possible without the experience I had from making the guidebooks and the contacts I have locally from doing my tours, and the guidebook would not be good without the sounding board I have from taking paying customers around to these sites and seeing how they respond to it.
And you also have a syndicated news column.
Well, then
you
more
sell
and more.
luggage, Rick Steves, luggage.
I can lay in bed at night and think about how can I reconfigure this so more people can get their hands on it. A big frustration for me lately, Chris, has been the frustration or the inconsistency and inefficiency and high cost of finding local guides. I love local guides, but they're very expensive and they're in many different languages and so on. So what I've done is I have made self-guided tours, and I thought, heck, I can just put them into a self-guided audio file through iTunes or from the web. People can download it for free onto their MP3 players, and now they've got a $50 tour for free in their ears as they do the Vatican or whatever.
Your plan has expanded over the years. I mean, you didn't have these types of options 20 years ago, and now you do. So you're continuing to keep the business model fresh and trying to reach a new audience.
It's endless.
One of the things, I told you a little bit before, but my grandparents, huge fans. They took their first trip to Europe using one of your books. You have been very successful with the baby boom generation. They've big success. A lot of people like it a lot. How have you maintained that freshness, getting new audiences? Because you have a lot of other people that are now, you know, you have Rough Guides, you have Lonely Planet. Right. So how do you maintain the product that you have, the name, the brand, which is you, for a fresh audience?
One of my favorite things, Chris, is to meet people in Europe who are my children's age who love my book. It blows me away because I'm not very hip for a 20-something person.
Although you did make a hip-hop song for your daughter.
Oh, you know that, yeah? That was fun, a little rap. But I've got an app out right now, an iPhone app. I haven't even seen it, and I think it's number 9 on the iPhone thing and under travel or something like that. But I've got young people that have the same passion for me of just understanding what our travelers' needs, designing the information.
Do you have a team, someone in charge of that side of it?
Yeah, I've got 70 people that work in my office, and I invest really big in web-related stuff and electronic ways to amplify my information. We have a radio show which goes out to 150 cities every week for an hour.
He's everywhere, and he's here with us on Venture. Stay with us. Welcome back to Venture. I'm Chris Valerio. We are talking travel with Rick Steves. He's with us today. So want to talk a little bit about your production company, Backdoor Productions. So what year did you decide to establish an actual company to have all these different things that you were doing, bring them under one helm?
Well, back in the late 1980s, a flurry of people came to me with ideas that you could take your lectures and be on TV. And I thought, that's ridiculous. It'll never happen. It's a lot of work, and it's very, very slim chance of it succeeding. Then I met this one group of people that really believed in what I did, and they were very talented and hardworking. So we teamed up, and we made our travel show. And thank goodness for public television, because there's a place for passionate little operators to share their information.
How did that partnership work out? How did y'all negotiate that?
Well, you have to get stations to run your program. So you have to cobble together the money to make a pilot. And if a few stations run it, and if it resonates with their audience...
Where did that money come from in the 1980s?
That would be all of us working without pay, hoping to get it back eventually. And it would be some small-time investor buying in on the operation. So, you know, some guy kicked in $20,000 or $30,000, and we put it together, went over there.
Is he still with you guys,
no.
That investor?
Well, I stayed with that group for 10 years. And they were stuck in a TV production mode which changed the priorities on the production. I'm lucky that I've got so much going on. I simply wanted to amplify my teaching without regard to how any individual show would sell, without regard to how likely it would get an underwriter. I just wanted to produce and amplify, because I'm kind of a preacher. I learned this. I've got to share it with as many people as possible. And from a business point of view, it'll come around and help me. I've got a good business going on because I'm not short-term focused on making the money. I'm short-term focused on helping people travel better. And if I put everything together, well-designed and consumer-friendly, I'll make plenty of money indirectly.
So how many investors do you have right now?
None.
None. So it's all owned by you.
It's very cheap to make I've got a radio show it plays an hour a week every Saturday in 150 cities, and it probably costs me $100,000 a year to produce. And I love it. It's a beautiful conduit, because I get to be, like you, the conduit between somebody who might have something of interest to the listening audience. And I just love doing that. And I can call in anybody who's an expert.
Do you have investors come and say, we'd really like to invest in you, Rick?
Well,
like, to
if
develop
people
the
want to
company?
invest in me, they want to invest in me so they can make money, not so they can teach people how to travel. And that's where it breaks down for me.
So you would never think about going public or trying to bring other investors in? Nothing like that?
I'm so public now. I just love it. I mean,
okay, well, let's talk about that. You are so public, and you're kind of one of the first individuals that made a name. You're branding yourself. Your name is your product.
Yes.
So first off, how does that feel? I mean, because at the end of the day, you have to keep doing these things. You have to maintain your face up front.
Yeah.
When you think about long-term prospects, how do you maintain a company and growing if it's all about you?
Well, it's a little bit overwhelming, and I'm just doing it as I've made enough money. I don't need to make any more money. You know, I mean, I can't understand people who'd sell their soul to make another $10 million. It's crazy. You know, once you're comfortable, why not have fun with your passion? I'm a businessman. For me, when I was a student, I always wanted to get A's. Now I just want to run a viable business with good ethics that's profitable, that employs people well and leaves me some money after, that I can then use to amplify my information more. I make these audio guide tours. They're very expensive to produce, and they're free. You just download them and listen to them. My reward is knowing that right now as we speak, every 10th American in the Sistine Chapel has me in their ears. Listening to this beautiful story.
But still, again, the question, what is it like to have your name actually as the brand?
It's fun because everybody is thankful for what I'm offering them. I was just in a bar 2 days ago in Dubrovnik as the sun was going down. It's a little place called the Hole in the Wall. It's just outside of the wall on this craggy rock cliff with these romantic people from all over the world enjoying a local beer or a local drink, and cruise ships sailing off into the horizon, and you're just surrounded by all this Croatian magic.
Travel now.
I love it. And I just thought,
okay.
God, there's 8 people here today because of my book, and they're having a beautiful time. That is a turn-on, and that makes me want to work harder.
Are the books the largest sources of revenue, or where's the largest source of revenue?
My company makes, I think, $40 million gross a year, and most of that is from our tours. We take 10,000 Americans around Europe on our tours. We do about 400 tours every year.
That is Rick Steves. We're talking travel with Rick Steves. Stay with us. Welcome back to Venture. I'm Chris Valerio. We are talking travel with Rick Steves, and we were talking just about your revenue sources. What's your greatest expense?
Well, payroll. I've got 70 people, and I've got a whole building full of editors working on my guidebooks. We publish 30 guidebooks. 20 of them are updated every year. I spend a huge percent of my royalties just on making the books the best in the business. I'm really committed to making these books really reliable.
The competition has increased over the years, certainly since you began. How has that played into?
I'm surprised how bad the competition is.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur here.
I mean, I really am. It's not rocket science to make a good guidebook. I'm the only guy with a name on the cover of the book out there looking at hotels, as far as I know.
Okay.
I wore out these shoes this summer. I've spent 70 days looking at hotels and restaurants. I don't care how big shot I am. I'm over there stressed out about, I want one good vegetarian restaurant here because people are tired of pizzas, or whatever. And this is what I do.
You said that your largest revenue source was the tours, but obviously we're in a major global recession.
Right.
How has that impacted? I mean, have you guys seen, the slowdown this year in business?
Well, yeah, everybody's down because everybody's measuring against an unrealistic spike after a decade of goosing the economy.
Would you say it's one of the hardest times in the travel business? I mean, you've been around for so long.
Well, no, it's not, because it shouldn't have been as high as it was last year. That was unrealistic. If you goose something long enough, it goes to so high, and then it doesn't respond anymore, and it falls back down. We are where we should have been without all this goosing going on. I'm sorry to be so crude about that, but that's my assessment of this whole economic crisis. I sold 14,000 or 12,000 seats last year. This year we'll sell 8,000 or 9,000 seats. I'm thankful for that. I'm down 25%, but I shouldn't have been up so high. I do the same thing regardless. Dollar goes up, dollar goes down, wars, terrorism, economy. We just steer a very straight course, and every year about 12 million Americans go to Europe. Maybe if 9 or 10 million go this year, that's more than enough to keep me in business. You
mentioned terrorism. How did your job change after 9/11? Because that's kind of what this new book is about. We'll talk about that in a bit. But how did that change?
That really is, I think, I lecture all over the country. I love talking to groups, and I used to talk budget travel. Slowly I've morphed into talking thoughtful travel in a way that broadens our perspective. Since 9/12, it's occurred to me that America needs to do a better job of understanding the world. There's a lot of fear out there in our country, and people are using fear against us. And I've found as a traveler that the flip side of fear is understanding. The United States is 4% of this planet. We're a beautiful 4%. I'd want to live nowhere else, and I certainly wouldn't want to run my business anywhere than right here. But there's 96% of the world out there that doesn't have the American dream.
So how do you think that by traveling, how do you think by traveling Americans come back? Because you've been very active. You travel, you come back, and you're active in your community as a result of what you've learned.
Right. Well, this is what I try to do with this new book, Travel as a Political Act, is let people know you can go to Mazatlan or you can go to Managua, and you'll have two different experiences. I was in Dubrovnik a week ago in a human traffic jam of cruisers, people that got off the boat on their tenders, they do their shopping, they go back to their cruise ship, and they're just amazed they can eat 5 meals a day and still snorkel when they get into port. Now, for them, that's travel. For me, that's not travel. That's hedonism. I got no problem with it. But they could have chosen to actually learn something by going 2 hours inland, where I was last week in Mostar, and see a country patching itself up after a horrendous war. I was just so inspired by my experience in Bosnia last week, and I chose to go there. I chose to broaden my perspective through travel, and I come home richer for it. I'm part of this planet. I'm thankful to be an American, but when you travel as a political act, all of a sudden, you don't fear the rest of the world, you celebrate it.
And that is Rick Steves, the travel guru. You're watching Venture.